Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our Sunday night A to Z of property strategies.
If I might interrupt a moment, Andrew, what comes after 7?
8?
It'll be part 8 then. Terrific.
Part 8. I'm having to count with my fingers and work that one out. And I'm an accountant. Cool. It's good job I didn't go over 10. Shoes and socks time, guys. Anyway, going back to that, we're on part 8, we're on C's, and this is the scintillating David Clouter on C's.
I'm trying to be very capricious this evening, and we have got consent to let, which is how I got started in property, really, because I was doing what you youngsters would call a rent-to-rent, and then I bought my own property, which wasn't nearly as nice as the place that I was effectively living in free. So I had already exchanged contracts, being a sort of naive, 23-year-old, and I rang up the bank and I said, "Help! What can I do?" And they said, "We'll give you consent to let." I had to pay, I think, 0.5% more, something like that. And I know this was long before buy-to-let had been invented. There wasn't such a thing. So I was ever so grateful for that, because what's the difference between 8% and 8.5%? It's a flash in
It's
the
a
pan.
0.5%.
And indeed it is. Indeed it is. But it's not the same as the difference between 0.5% and 1%, or 1%, 1.5%. It is in a sense, but it is in another sense.
We're not American sense. Carry on. Sorry, we're digressing.
So you can't obviously start an entire buy-to-let portfolio using consent to let, but if your circumstances change in such a way that you own one property that you're not able to live in, then you can have a nice word with the friendly people at the bank, and subject to all their due diligence and regulatory requirements, they might just do it for you.
Yeah. Or for a set fee, because it's often quite normal for lenders to say, if you wish to convert this mortgage to a buy-to-let, our fee is, and they generally advertise a fee at circa £500.
Yes, that's right. That's right. I don't remember that far back. I probably had to pay a fee as well, but I was just fixated on interest rates.
Totally. Well, it's a big cost, and it's a recurrent cost rather than one-off.
Indeed.
So,
Now,
C's.
Conservatory is not a voting choice. It's a thing made out of glass that you stick on the side of your house. Why might you want to do it? 2 square meters. It's quite cheap. What could you use it for? Well, if you had a sort of HMO, and if it got to the summer, you couldn't you? That could become the communal area. Not for the whole year, probably, but you could squeeze somebody in, subject to licensing requirements and that kind of thing. I have seen HMOs where they appear to have conservatories with radiators and everything as the communal areas. It's a bit naughty though, isn't it?
Well, I actually viewed about 3-4 years ago a HMO, and they were letting the conservatory as a room.
Oh.
And, well, needless to say, I didn't buy because it was overpriced. But I felt sorry for the poor people who were resident in that conservatory. Not a good one for rental.
Ooh, no.
But it adds value, it adds space, and it uplifts the asset value, generally speaking.
Because it's quite a low-cost build, so the chances
Yeah.
are it will uplift the cost of your property. I did a refurb and sell on a while ago, and I remember this one specifically because I stuck a conservatory on, and the first thing the new owner did is took it away. So kind of there we are. These things happen.
No, I think we've all seen it. So, are there any other ways that we can make money as a strategy using C?
Consultancy has got to be one where those of us who've got a bit of experience in the property industry, that would be you. I'm just the clown here.
No, I don't take that. I think you've got a lot of experience too, David. Don't put yourself down.
You're very kind, sir. Put it there.
Go for it.
So we will talk to people who are thinking of doing things that might be new for them, things that might be a bit innovative, but which we've got some experience in, and by lending our voice, it can help people to focus and to move their businesses forward. Really,
Well, I think looking at the consultancy side of things, there are 4 things that you often need in property: time, knowledge, money. Now, you can get money from other people. You can buy time by employing somebody to have that time for you. You can gain knowledge going on a course. What you can't do is gain experience, and that's where a consultant comes in, is picking their brains for their experience.
That's right. That's right. And this is something that, the only way to get experience is either by bringing somebody in who's got that experience or waiting 20 years. So which is it going to be? It's a bit of a
Yeah.
no-brainer in a sense.
Well, I did come across several weeks back some people who had time, they had some money, they had some knowledge because they'd been on courses, and they actually made some investments and they took advice from some professionals, supposed professionals, and we were talking about this earlier, and the advice they took was wrong, and it cost them over £1 million.
Oh dear. So
So
the price of having a consultant in is minuscule compared to the cost of getting it wrong.
absolutely,
I guess.
absolutely. I mean, to them, it's cataclysmic in terms of the cost of the bad advice they took. But there you go. So,
Now, contract trading, which is not about hired assassins, nor is it about some strategy in the city of London. It's about
it's not going back to our B strategy of brown envelopes either.
no, absolutely not. We've put that one well behind us. Contract trading is where you've got a builder who's working on a development, and you can say to him at certain times of the year, like coming up to his tax year end or something, or there are other times as well, or times when he needs to boost the books, boost the cash flow a bit, you can make him a sort of 4 for 3 offer or something. So give me 4 properties or the right to buy 4 properties for the price of 3. You don't actually buy those. You then trade, say, 3 of the 4 to people who will sell them. You can sell them for slightly more than they paid, less than the price on the books, and you might just get number 4 for yourself for free if you do it right. And so that's quite a nice strategy that can be used. I have used it once or twice myself, and it works in the right circumstances with the right developer. If you can strike a rapport, it's something you can do.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, developers will often sell stuff if you time it towards the end of their financial year or the end of a site and they're just looking to shift. And you can often put together some contracts with them where you're either doing an assisted sale or taking the asset on yourself or some other strategy, introducing a buyer for them.
Now, working with contractors on your refurb or your build and this kind of thing, it's subject to force majeure, obviously. It's subject to the elements if you're working on a field, putting in some footings or something. It's also subject to the vagaries of goodness knows what, like pub closing times or the World Cup or other things that might impact upon this.
We've all seen that.
So what do you do? Friday afternoons, and taking ownership of the site by leaving a bag of tools there while you go off to work on another one, and all these sorts of things. So how can you incentivize these very fine people without really kind of causing too much antagonism in a sort of upbeat, sort of helpful way? The question is to package the same thing in 2 different ways. So you can either say, unless you finish this on time, there's a 10% surcharge, penalty, this kind of thing. And that works in a fairly sort of negative way because the contractor will be working very quickly until they feel they can't possibly meet this deadline. They think, well, you know what?
Throw the towel in.
But why don't we turn the whole thing on its head and actually offer to pay them 10% less for the build, but with a 10% bonus if they complete on time? And that's quite good. It's a sort of carrot and stick thing. So we've got effectively the same deal here, but we're being Mr. Nice Guy and presenting something nice.
Yep.
And it's just a way of representing the whole thing.
And who doesn't love a bonus for doing a good job? So if they complete your job on time, they get a bonus.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I've got a plumber who consistently undervalues himself, and so I always have to give him a bonus anyway because I say, how much is that? And I say, no, have some more. Or have some more, or however you swipe, or whatever you do nowadays. So there is that. Another C. Contrarian investment.
It's a bit contrary to belief, isn't it?
Isn't that a wonderful thing when everybody's going that way, one person goes that way, and the pot of gold is there, and they're all chasing the end of the rainbow, which is obviously over there, but the pot of gold, let me tell you, isn't at the end of the rainbow. It's there in the middle of a field, in plain view, but nobody can see it, and they've read all the newspapers, whose job it is to sell newspapers, not to actually give sound advice as such, which some advice in newspapers may be sound, others of it may be sensationalist, others of it may be just listening to hearsay that the journalist has picked up in the pub, or seeing which way the crowd is going and giving them more of the same. But in terms of doing deals, we have to look at where the value is, look at where the opportunities are, and rely on our gut instincts, not herd behavior, to make things happen. So in my property journey, I've very often been doing things that nobody else has been doing at that particular time, because I've seen that they work for me. I mean, like HMOs I was doing before they were even called HMOs. And when they started calling them HMOs, I thought, oh, I don't like having to give the tenant. I mean, I always gave people lots of value and lots of stuff that was good. And for example, my fire regs and everything were always way ahead of what's required, even in today's regulations and that sort of thing. So all those kind of things. But, so many meters of workspace in the kitchen per tenant was never something that anybody ever asked for nor needed. And you can put 6 bedrooms in where all that extra kitchen workspace would otherwise go. So, I'm exaggerating perhaps slightly. And then rent to rent, as it's called today. I was doing that in the very early 1980s. And I quit that in about 1990, and so on and so forth. So don't worry if you're not in step with anybody else, because actually there's more of a market for what you're doing, but it's not being chased by everybody. And so when you come along with a proposition that is just your proposition, people are much more likely to say yes than if 100 people that day have been knocking on their door saying exactly the same thing.
Well, I totally agree with you. And one of the things I would say is newspapers only sell if they give dramatic headlines. Therefore, they're not going to say buy-to-let's the best thing ever, because it doesn't really sell newspapers. If they say buy-to-let landlords are terrible, then everyone who isn't a buy-to-let landlord will rush out and buy that newspaper because they want to find out just how terrible they are. The other thing I say to people, which is contrarian to what a lot of other people do, lots of people follow prices. I say follow politics. And if you look at a statement that Boris Johnson made shortly after his election, he said, I'm going to move the House of Lords from London to York. Now, if you're following politics, not prices, you might be a smart person to go and reserve yourself real estate in York, perhaps under an option agreement, where you can complete on that if that transaction goes ahead. Therefore, you're effectively land banking opportunities for the future where asset prices will rise as a result of politics, i.e. political decisions that have been made.
And sometimes there are rumours, like the Telegraph and the Financial Times, just before this was recorded, indicated that perhaps the Tories are going to bring in a mansion tax, which would obviously impact anybody buying property over possibly £1 million, and give them a recurring amount of money that they need to give the Treasury. They've talked about perhaps clamping down radically on relief on pension money put into pensions, so that it would be pegged basically the basic rate of tax. This would heavily affect higher rate taxpayers. These are just kind of rumours at the moment, but whilst these things are being rumoured, would you go out there and buy yourself an expensive house? Would you go out there and set up some kind of elaborate tax scheme as a high rate taxpayer, or would you wait and see?
Absolutely. Now, a smart person would de-risk it, but that's where certain strategies come in that we will cover in later videos. So, moving on from contrarian, because we could be contrary all day.
We could, and very often we are, but not today. Today's your lucky day. We're going to talk about controlling as opposed to owning. And we did mention, we hinted upon this in video 7, was it, of the series?
The commercial property?
Where we were talking about commercial property and leases and so forth. Now, there are benefits and there are disadvantages, because I couldn't think of the opposite word to benefit, but for owning something. The advantage of owning something is that as the price of that something rises, so your equity in it rises, so your asset base rises.
Yeah.
It might fall, and you might then start to lose, especially with gearing. If you've got a property that's I don't know, you've paid, it's worth 200. Your equity stake in it is 50. When the price of that property goes up to 250, you've doubled. If the price of that property fell by just 50 grand, you've been wiped out. So there are times when owning isn't all it's cracked up to be. In a hugely fast rising market, it's probably quite a good thing if you buy there, but not if you buy there, in other words. So there are times when you can make money out of property just by controlling it. You've maybe got a lease, for example, on a property. It's cash flowing brilliantly, but maybe you don't want to be tied into this area for the next 20 years. Maybe there's some major road building going on over the next 5 years, or some big infrastructure project where you see a lot of money coming into your service accommodation business or whatever from all the contractors who are visiting. But there's an end point, there's a cut-off point where you can see that's going to end, and you might take the view that at that point not only the bottom might fall out of the service accommodation market, but there's going to be in that particular locale, or they've closed the steelworks or the shipbuilding thing, that suddenly the bottom falls out of the market and you're left with something that's a real liability. If you've leased it, you have the option to not renew.
Totally, and I think it's really important to stress. I see people going investing out of area, for argument's sake, in the north of England, where they can buy a simple rental property for about 40,000-50,000. It generates a £500 a month cash flow, so the yield is really good. The capital value is low. The capital appreciation is likely to remain low. The sales cycle is also to remain lengthy because of the demographic, but they're awfully affected by political decisions. And if they suddenly decide to stop building oil rigs or submarines or whatever it is in that area, that tends to be the single industry, and it can shatter an economy, and everybody left owning the assets in that area are left holding the baby.
And that's one reason why when I'm looking at investment areas, I like to talk about what I call 5 pillars. Everybody in property education now talks about 5 pillars in various different contexts. I was the first, and I use it in this way, that in an unknown area, I want to have ideally a big educational establishment like a university. I want to have a hospital in that area. I want to have 3 big household name companies that I've heard of. I don't get out much, so I haven't heard of very many, and and they must be working in different sectors. And then you're not very exposed in that area. And there's a sort of gold mine area which we'll come and talk about later on in one of our videos, which combines the sort of capital growth of the south with the cash flow of the north and with the certainty that I've just described. And that would be quite good if we knew where that was.
I think it would. Oh, we'll cover that in another video.
Sorry, we haven't got time
You can
to do
tell
that
me when
today.
we go off camera.
Absolutely.
So, next, do we have more Cs? Because, I mean, we've done a couple of videos on Cs.
We are very, very close. I reckon that this will be our last video of Cs, with a bit of luck. We're talking about
We've only got 2 minutes.
cosmetic refurbishments. Does that mean I have to talk at my usual very quick nature? So a cosmetic refurb, you don't really do very much except give it a lick of paint and hang a new picture on the wall. And in terms of letting potential of property, okay, around the country, mostly kind of standards have gone quite up. But you know, if you've got a horrible grubby wall and a picture of shipwrecks, and I've seen places like this which had a picture on the wall of shipwrecks. I mean, come on. So you can go down the local charity shop and you buy some nice, colourful thing, and then you go to B&Q or Homebase. Other shops are available, and just whitewash that wall. It's going to make all the difference between letting.
Well, they
it
might not if Amazon's put them out of business.
So you know, little things that you can do, small touches that are going to make the difference to your property in terms of mostly letting it, but even with a bit of a long shot, perhaps selling it.
Okay. That's, yeah. You can make some quick money on doing cosmetic refurbs, and I know a few people do flipping of properties, doing cosmetic refurbs.
Absolutely. So
we have more Cs. Do we have time for them?
there are 2, and we're going to do about 30 seconds each.
Go on then.
Crowdfunding, which is where a lot of people get together through an organisation to ensure all the sort of regulatory compliance through a platform, and they stick a lot of money in, and then the money goes out to various different projects. There's a spread of risk, and there's compliance. What could be better? One thing to note about crowdfunding, and this links on to the next one as well, of cryptocurrencies, which people invest in, is this. That for the banks, because of the fractional reserve system that they can use, they can, as it were, pluck money out of thin air and create more.
Yeah.
With this is important. People don't realise this. With crowdfunding and with cryptocurrencies, you're just moving stuff around. So going head to head, those guys will never win. I just thought I'd mention that.
Well, the other thing with crowdfunding, if I can give an advisory note to everybody here, make sure that the platform you choose is FCA accredited, and make sure that if they're advertising an FCA accreditation, that the accreditation is actually for crowdfunding and not some other purpose. Very important, otherwise you might not be protected. But cryptocurrencies,
Yes,
go for it.
absolutely. Well, I mean, cryptocurrencies are something that, frankly, I found it hard to understand because this is a sort of an equation, really, in cyberspace, and you're just creating different solutions to this equation, and suddenly you're hanging some sort of value on that. So, in the same sense, in a sense that with fiat currencies, which are not tied to gold or tied to any other sort of asset, the same is true with crypto, and crypto doesn't even have the backing of any sort of government. So I can see why it would shoot up in value astronomically. I could see why it would shoot down in value astronomically as well. So it like wouldn't be for me. And I just like bricks and mortar. I like something that I can touch.
And what I would sort of add to the cryptocurrencies is the person who invented the currency could actually just make more.
Oh,
So the value of what you've got could be devalued by them creating more. And also, you may have
yes.
perhaps seen some uh, fraudulent, let's describe it as, reported in the press, people who've created cryptocurrencies and then vamoosed with everybody's money.
Absolutely. Not for
Caveat
me.
emptor.
Not for me. Currency isn't really for me either because in a similar way you've got QE where we create more currency. But that's another
Yeah.
story for another day.
And I think we've run to the end of today's video on Cs, so we will see you on the other side where we're doing Ds. If you haven't already, subscribe. If you like what we're doing and you want to hear when the next one comes, hit the bell icon and you'll get an email off YouTube to warn you that the new one is being premiered. And hit the like button if you've liked this. And please tell us your comments if you have got some about either a bit of knowledge that we've not shared with you here or something that you'd like to know.
See you on the next one. Thank you.
All the best.